The lukewarm gravy tasted like ashes, a faint, lingering bitterness that coated my tongue and seemed to leach the joy from the very air. I watched my sister's children, 5 and 7, their faces alight with anticipation, being served generous portions of roasted chicken. Their mother, Sarah, a woman I had once admired, beamed as she watched her youngest, a girl with curls the color of spun honey, receive a particularly crispy piece of skin. The skin itself glistened under the soft glow of the dining room light, a beacon of golden perfection. Beside them my gangly 9-year-old son Leo, who always seemed to be growing into himself at an alarming rate, and my shy 6-year-old daughter Lily, who habitually shrunk into the background, were already poking at a small pile of what was left. It was mostly an assortment of forgotten scraps, tiny, glistening bits of skin that had been meticulously picked clean, tough, sinewy fragments of meat that clung stubbornly to the bones, and the pale, almost translucent meat that had been overlooked in the frenzy of selection. It was the same story, played out with sickening regularity, every holiday, every family gathering, and this time something deep inside me, a tightly coiled spring of resentment that had been building for years, just snapped. The air in the room, already thick with the cloying scent of cheap air freshener and the equally artificial veneer of forced cheer, felt suffocating, pressing in on me until I could barely draw a breath. My sister Sarah had always possessed a peculiar talent, a mastery of the subtle slight. It wasn't overt cruelty, nothing so crude that anyone else, an aunt, an uncle, a passing cousin, could readily pinpoint as malicious. Instead, it was a persistent, insidious favoritism, a quiet current that ran beneath the surface of every interaction, leaving me feeling like a perpetual second-class citizen within my own family. This pattern had begun years ago, in the wake of our parents' passing. Sarah, always the responsible one, the one who had inherited their meticulous organizational skills, had naturally assumed the role of matriarch. Our parents had doted on her, a fact I had accepted with a child's unquestioning acceptance, and that doting, I now realized, had never truly ceased, even long after she had become an adult. She had always been the favored child, the golden girl, the one whose slightest misstep was met with understanding, whose every success was amplified. And that inherent favoritism, that belief in her singular perfection, had inevitably extended to her offspring. My own children, quieter by nature, less demanding in their needs, somehow always seemed to be an afterthought, a footnote in the grand narrative of Sarah's family life. This particular year it was Thanksgiving, a holiday synonymous with abundance and family togetherness. The house buzzed with the familiar, exhilarating chaos of a large gathering. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, aunts whose advice I subtly avoided, uncles with booming laughs that echoed through the halls. A vast sea of faces I'd known my entire life, yet somehow I felt increasingly adrift amongst them. Sarah, naturally, was the hostess with the mostest, her domain the epicenter of culinary triumph. Her dining room table, a mahogany behemoth that had witnessed generations of family feasts, groaned under the sheer weight of its abundance. 2 perfectly brown turkeys, their skins a flawless lacquered gold, sat majestically on ornate platters. Beside them mountains of fluffy stuffing, studded with fragrant herbs, were piled high. Bowls overflowed with creamy mashed potatoes, their surfaces rippled like gentle waves. Cups brimmed with jewel-toned cranberry sauce, and a verdant green bean casserole, crowned with crispy fried onions, completed the edible panorama. It was a veritable feast, a testament to her supposed generosity, a dazzling display of her domestic prowess. But the generosity I was slowly, painfully learning was anything but indiscriminate. It was, in fact, remarkably selective. As soon as we had arrived, barely shedding our coats in the entryway, Sarah had swept my children up in a whirlwind of effusive greetings. "Oh, you've gotten so big," she'd exclaimed, her voice a little too loud, a little too bright, before her attention had instantly, seamlessly pivoted back to her own kids. She showered them with compliments, her gaze lingering on their every movement, and produced a small assortment of trinkets, a sparkly hair clip for Chloe, a miniature race car for her son Ethan, as if anticipating their every nascent desire. My son Leo, a boy of quiet observation, had then, with a shy smile, presented her with a drawing he had spent weeks working on for her. It was a bright, colorful picture of a smiling sun, its rays radiating a child's pure joy. Sarah had taken it, her fingers brushing against his briefly, and offered a perfunctory, "That's nice, hon." EY, before setting it aside without a second glance, her gaze already fixed on her daughter. "Chloe, darling, did you bring your new doll? Show Auntie," she chirped, her attention completely absorbed by her own children's world. My daughter, Lily, usually a vibrant spark, had just shrunk a little, her shoulders slumping almost imperceptibly, a silent observer of the immediate dismissal. The pattern, a dishearteningly familiar one, continued throughout the afternoon. Sarah's children, Chloe and Ethan, were effortlessly ushered to the best seats at the table, their desires anticipated before they were even voiced. They were offered the first choice of desserts, the prime spots for watching cartoons on the oversized television in the den, the coveted positions closest to the adults during conversation. My children, in contrast, were subtly, almost imperceptibly, nudged towards the edges, their needs met only after all others had been satisfied, offered whatever remained, the slightly less perfect slice of cake, the remnants of the fruit bowl. And I, the silent enabler, had always just gone along with it. It's just how Sarah is, I told myself for years, a mantra designed to soothe my own discomfort. She means well. She's just busy. But watching Leo's face fall, his shoulders drawing in as he looked at his meager plate, the pale, stringy meat a stark contrast to the generous portions his cousins had received, and Lily's hesitant, almost apologetic reach for the last slightly bruised pear, I knew that meaning well was no longer a sufficient excuse. The sheer injustice of it all, the casual, almost thoughtless disregard, had curdled within me, coalescing into a cold, hard knot in my stomach, a physical manifestation of years of simmering disappointment. The lukewarm gravy incident was, for me, the final undeniable straw. It wasn't solely about the food, though the lukewarm, ash-tinged gravy was undeniably symbolic of the entire experience. It was about the entire deeply ingrained dynamic, the unspoken rules that governed our family interactions. Sarah, I understood with chilling clarity, expected me to continue bringing my children to these gatherings, to subject them to this subtle, soul-eroding humiliation, and then afterward to dutifully assist in the cleanup, to be the quiet, agreeable sister-in-law who never caused a fuss, who never rocked the boat. But the quiet, agreeable sister-in-law, the one who had prioritized peace over her own feelings for so long, had just reached her breaking point. As the adults began to push their plates away, a satisfied murmur filling the room, Sarah, ever the efficient hostess, bustled around, already delegating tasks with an air of practiced domesticity. "Oh, could you grab those dessert plates from the kitchen, darling?" she'd said to me, her voice dripping with a false sweetness that now grated on my nerves. "And perhaps you could start on the dishes after that? The children can help me clear their little plates for now." Her own children, Chloe and Ethan, meanwhile, were already completely engrossed in a new, noisy video game, their faces illuminated by the flashing screen, utterly oblivious to the quiet undercurrents of tension. I stood up, not with a dramatic flourish of anger, but with a strange, unexpected calm that settled over me like a gentle cloak. The knot in my stomach hadn't disappeared, not by any means, but it had somehow solidified, transformed into something resolute, something unwavering. "You know, Sarah," I said, my voice steady, clear, and cutting through the low drone of conversation that had resumed, "I think we'll be heading home now." A flicker of genuine surprise, a fleeting expression that was quickly masked by a practiced, almost imperceptible smile crossed Sarah's face. "Already?" she exclaimed, her tone a carefully constructed blend of concern and mild disbelief. "But the pie is just coming out. And the cousins were so looking forward to seeing your kids' new magic tricks." She knew, as well as I did, that my children had no repertoire of magic tricks, and that the cousins likely had no particular interest in them. It was a desperate, transparent attempt to maintain her control, to preserve her carefully constructed narrative of warm, inclusive hospitality. "No, thank you," I replied, my gaze meeting hers directly, holding it with a new strength. "Leo and Lily have had a long day, and they need to get to bed. I'll take them now." I didn't offer any flimsy excuses about being tired myself, or about the disappointing quality of the food. I deliberately kept the focus squarely and solely on my children's well-being. The table fell silent for a beat, an almost palpable hush descending as the implications of my statement registered. A few of the older aunts, their faces etched with the wisdom of years, exchanged knowing glances, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken truth that had just been voiced. Sarah's smile tightened, her lips forming a thin, unyielding line. "Are you sure? It seems a bit abrupt. We barely saw you at the table." This was it. The moment had arrived for the subtle truth, delivered without accusation, without the explosive emotion that would have made it easily dismissible. "Yes, I'm sure," I said, my voice remaining even, devoid of any hint of acrimony. And to be honest, Sarah, it's always a bit difficult to get them a good plate of food when your children get served first every single time. They're always left with whatever's left over, and it doesn't feel right to keep bringing them here for that. It's not fair to them. The color drained from Sarah's face, leaving it a pale, almost translucent mask. She opened her mouth to protest, to deflect, to deny, but the words caught in her throat, a silent testament to the truth of my observation. For the first time I could ever remember, she looked genuinely flustered, caught completely off guard, her usual composure crumbling. A few of the cousins, their eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and dawning realization, leaned in, their attention now fully focused on the unfolding drama. The casual indifference, the almost unconscious habit that had fueled her behavior for so long, was suddenly, uncomfortably, exposed to the unflattering light of others' attention. That's not true," she stammered, the words lacking conviction. A weak shield against the undeniable reality. She glanced at her own children, who remained blissfully unaware, still lost in the digital world of their video game, and then her gaze shifted back to me, a dawning realization in her eyes that she had been seen, her carefully constructed facade of favoritism laid bare for all to witness. I didn't press the point. I didn't need to. The silence that followed was more powerful than any accusation I could have made. I simply gathered my children, Leo and Lily, who looked up at me with a complex mixture of confusion and a dawning, hopeful understanding. "Come on, guys," I said, my voice soft, gentle but firm, a reassurance of protection. "Let's go home." As we walked out the door, the cheerful sounds of the party, the laughter, the music, the ongoing conversation began to fade behind us, replaced by the crisp, cool air of the autumn evening. Sarah's stunned silence followed us, a heavy presence that lingered even as we climbed into the car. We drove home in a comfortable, companionable quiet, the unspoken tension of the afternoon slowly dissipating with every mile. Leo, for the first time all day, looked genuinely relaxed, his small shoulders unhunched. Lily, for the first time, wasn't hiding behind my leg, her small hand resting loosely in mine, her gaze now directed outwards, towards the passing streetlights. The consequences, as it turned out, were not dramatic. Sarah didn't have a public meltdown. There were no shouting matches, no tearful confrontations. But the subsequent weeks were noticeably, undeniably different. When Sarah called, her tone was more hesitant, less demanding, a subtle shift in her usual authoritative cadence. She asked about the children with a newfound sincerity, a genuine curiosity that felt almost like an apology, as if she were trying to prove, both to herself and to me, that she had heard my words. She even extended an invitation for a casual movie night at her house, a gesture of reconciliation that felt both tentative and sincere. And when the popcorn was passed around that evening, she made a point of ensuring Leo and Lily received the first handfuls, a small but significant acknowledgement of their presence. The whispers among the wider family, I heard later through the grapevine, were subtle, nuanced. Some, naturally, defended Sarah, dismissing my concerns as an overreaction, calling me overly sensitive. Others, however, the ones who had been silent witnesses to Sarah's subtle favoritism firsthand, the ones who had seen the repeated pattern of neglect, nodded in understanding. The carefully constructed image of Sarah as the perfect, generous hostess, the epitome of familial warmth, had a visible crack in it. My quiet statement, devoid of anger or histrionics, had, in its own way, done more damage to her carefully curated reputation than any explosive outburst ever could have. And for my children, they began to breathe a little easier, to feel a sense of ease in family gatherings that had previously been tinged with anxiety. They knew, in a way that was more profound than any spoken reassurance, that they were seen, that they mattered, that their needs were not an inconvenience. The scraps were no longer their default. The breaking point hadn't been about anger, not truly. It had been about dignity, about reclaiming a sense of fairness and respect for my children. And in the quiet act of asserting that dignity, of reclaiming that fundamental right, I had found a quiet, unshakable peace, a sense of inner resolve that would sustain me far beyond the confines of that particular Thanksgiving feast. The lukewarm gravy had, in its own peculiar way, been a catalyst for a much-needed, and ultimately liberating change.